The desert night felt heavy, almost suffocating, as the lights reflected off the struggling Ferrari sitting on the grid. And I want you to picture this the way every fan did that moment. Lewis Hamilton, a 7-time world champion, strapped into a car everyone had already written off. Starting 18th, no pace, no hope. Not a single expert, commentator, or engineer expected anything more than a painful afternoon. And honestly, you probably didn't either. Before we go deeper, tell me something. In the comments right now, did you think Hamilton could make progress from 18th? Just a simple yes or no. I'm really curious to see how many of us were thinking the same thing. Because this wasn't just another difficult weekend for Ferrari. This was a crisis unfolding in real time, and no one seemed ready for it. The SF25 had been labeled unpredictable, unstable, and, in some cases, even undrivable. And watching Hamilton line up that far back felt like the final confirmation that Ferrari's season was already lost. But here's the twist, and this is where the entire story begins to flip. While most of the paddock silently accepted that Ferrari would play damage limitation, Hamilton wasn't approaching the race that way. The calmness he carried before lights out wasn't resignation, it was preparation, something a lot of people completely misunderstood in that moment. And honestly, this is why I love talking you through moments like this. If you're into these deep dives that look past the headlines, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell. We're pushing hard toward 2,000 subscribers, and your support genuinely helps keep these detailed breakdowns coming. The expectations around Ferrari were so low that even rival drivers approached Hamilton with sympathy. That's how far things had fallen. Pundits were calling the weekend an embarrassment. Fans were preparing for another disaster. And inside the Ferrari garage, the mood couldn't have been heavier. What makes this moment so fascinating is how completely different the race turned out from the script everyone had already written. The question, the one that still echoes today, is how Hamilton managed not only to avoid the humiliation everyone predicted, but to turn the entire paddock upside down. And to really understand that, you need to know exactly how broken the SF25 actually was. So, let's take a closer look at the car Hamilton was supposed to fail in, and why everything that followed simply shouldn't have been possible. The SF25 wasn't just a slow car. It wasn't just off the pace. It was fundamentally broken in ways that even Ferrari struggled to fully explain. And that's where the real heart of this story begins. Because before you can appreciate what Hamilton did on that track, you need to understand the monster he was fighting. And I want you to really picture this, because it sets the tone for everything that follows. From the very first practice session, the SF25 behaved less like a precision-engineered Formula One machine and more like a wounded animal. It bucked, snapped, and swerved at the slightest provocation. Engineers called it unstable. Drivers called it unpredictable. But the truth was even worse. Ferrari didn't understand their own car anymore. This instability wasn't a one-off problem. It had been haunting Ferrari all season, but Qatar exposed it brutally. Hamilton, known for finding pace in machines no one else can tame, felt something was deeply wrong the moment he hit the throttle. His Q1 elimination in both the sprint and the main qualifying wasn't the result of a driver out of form. It was the car reaching the limit before he could even begin to push. And his radio message, that quiet, "The car won't go faster," sent shivers down the paddock because Hamilton doesn't say things like that lightly. He's known for extracting miracles from bad cars, but in that moment, even he sounded like he had reached the end. Meanwhile, Charles Leclerc wasn't doing much better. Sure, he scraped into Q3, but at what cost? You probably remember the clips of him fighting the steering wheel like he was wrestling a wild animal. Every corner was a gamble. Every lap was a risk. And that's when the truth came out. Ferrari had stopped developing this car back in April. While McLaren, Red Bull, and Mercedes kept refining their machines, Ferrari was already thinking ahead to next year's regulations. The SF25 wasn't just flawed, it was abandoned, a ghost project left, to limp through the season without updates, without solutions, and without hope. And this is where I want your take, because it matters. Do you think Ferrari made the right call in shifting development so early? Should they have fought harder to save this season? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because the fan base is completely torn on this one, and I want to know where you stand. Inside the team, the mood was grim. Engineers were running simulations that predicted more suffering. Strategists were preparing for a race spent at the back. And the unspoken truth was floating around the garage. Maybe even Hamilton couldn't save this. The stage was perfectly set for a disaster. The kind of race you forget as soon as it ends. But instead, what we got was the complete opposite. This wasn't the beginning of a failure. It was the spark that triggered a transformation. Because as the lights went out, everything Ferrari believed about the SF25, everything the paddock believed, was about to be completely rewritten. And in the next part, you'll see exactly how Hamilton took a car everyone called undrivable and turned it into something no one could have predicted. When the lights went out, it felt like the world paused for a moment. Every expectation, every prediction, every grim forecast about Ferrari was hanging in the air. And yet, within a single lap, Hamilton began tearing all of it down. You probably know those moments in racing when something just feels different, when you can sense a driver is operating on another level entirely. That's exactly what was happening here. Hamilton wasn't just moving forward, he was rewriting the limits of what that broken Ferrari could do. From the first meters, his driving looked nothing like the cautious, damage limitation approach Ferrari had planned. His start was sharp, aggressive, and perfectly calculated. He sliced through gaps that didn't exist for anyone else. Every turn looked like he had rehearsed it 1,000 times, even though the car underneath him behaved like a ticking bomb. And if you watched it live, you probably remember how quickly the skepticism in the commentary box shifted. Suddenly, it wasn't "Ferrari is doomed today." It was, "Wait, what is Hamilton doing with that car?" By lap 1, he already had momentum. By lap 15, he wasn't just in the points. He was hunting cars that had been miles ahead of Ferrari all season. And inside the Ferrari pit wall, something strange was happening. Silence. Not the usual frantic energy, not the constant strategizing, just disbelief. Their internal models were wrong. Their expectations were shattered. Hamilton had taken the worst car on the grid and bent its limits into something almost unrecognizable. Then came the moment that really broke Ferrari's understanding of their own machine. Around lap 30, on hard tires, Hamilton was running at podium pace. Not decent pace. Podium pace. Let that sink in for a second. The same car that couldn't survive, Q1 was suddenly competing with frontrunners. Engineers were staring at telemetry screens like they were looking at ghost data. Everything the simulator predicted about the SF25 was being contradicted in real time. It was as if Hamilton had unlocked a version of the car no one even knew existed. And here's the fascinating part. It wasn't luck. It wasn't chaos. It was intentional. Hamilton didn't fight the car the way Leclerc did. He didn't try to overpower the instability. He adapted to it, embraced it, and reshaped his entire driving style around its flaws. New braking points, smoother transitions, tiny micro-adjustments through corners, better tire preservation than drivers on softer compounds. He was racing on an entirely different wavelength, one that the SF25, broken as it was, responded to. Let me ask you something, because your answer says a lot about how you see the rest of this story. Do you think this was pure Hamilton brilliance? Or is it proof Ferrari misunderstood their own car from the start? Drop your answer in the comments. One word: brilliance or misunderstanding. Because by the time the checkered flag waved, Hamilton hadn't just saved Ferrari's weekend. He exposed something far more uncomfortable. And in the next part, you'll see exactly why this performance didn't just impress Ferrari. It terrified them. When the dust settled and the drivers climbed out of their cars, the real shockwave wasn't Hamilton's result itself. It was the implications. Ferrari wasn't celebrating. They weren't relieved. They were unsettled, even rattled, because what Hamilton had just done didn't fit within their understanding of the SF25. And that's where the real crisis began. You could see it in Fred Vasseur's face during the post-race interviews. He wasn't proud, he wasn't defensive, he was confused. Hamilton had just proven that the car everyone labeled as undrivable could, under the right hands, perform at a level Ferrari's own data said was impossible. And that raises a brutal question Ferrari could no longer ignore. If Hamilton could do this, why couldn't Leclerc? This wasn't just a performance gap. It was a fundamental contradiction. Leclerc had been publicly calling the car a zero-performance disaster. His feedback guided Ferrari's developmental choices. His struggles shaped how the engineers understood the car's behaviors and limitations. But Hamilton, in the same machine, on the same asphalt, under the same conditions, turned that narrative upside down. It wasn't simply about who was faster. It was about whose interpretation of the car reflected reality. Ferrari suddenly found themselves with two conflicting visions of the same vehicle. And that is a nightmare scenario for any F1 team, especially one already fighting instability and doubt. Inside Maranello, this created a dangerous crack. Development direction depends entirely on driver feedback. But now, which voice should they trust? The one who said the car was uncontrollable, or the one who just proved the opposite? If they follow Leclerc's feedback, they risk building solutions to problems that might not exist. If they follow Hamilton's, they risk shattering the confidence of the driver they once considered their long-term cornerstone. And that's the part no one in Ferrari wanted to admit out loud. Hamilton's brilliance had unintentionally destabilized the team's hierarchy. Leclerc wasn't just beaten, he was exposed. His weaknesses under EDT, pressure, his tendency to overdrive unstable machinery, his struggles adapting on the fly, all of it was magnified by Hamilton's performance. And the Italian media, usually quick to criticize Hamilton, suddenly went quiet. That silence was the loudest message of all. They saw what everyone saw. Hamilton hadn't just met expectations. He had exceeded them in a way that forced Ferrari to rethink everything, from driving philosophy to engineering priorities. But this is where it gets even more intense. Hamilton's performance didn't just highlight Leclerc's limitations, it forced Ferrari to confront the possibility that they had been building their future around the wrong assumptions. And I want your honest take on this. If you were Ferrari, whose feedback would you build the next car around? Hamilton or Leclerc? Drop the name in the comments, because this exact question is at the center of Ferrari's current identity crisis. In the next part, we're going to break down how Hamilton's drive didn't just expose internal weaknesses, but also opened up two terrifyingly different paths for Ferrari's future. One that could finally lead to a championship, and one that could send the team spiraling even deeper into chaos. Now here's the fork in the road Ferrari faces, and why this moment in Qatar matters far beyond a single race. There are two very different futures staring Maranello in the face. The first path is the hopeful one. Ferrari listens, digs into Hamilton's telemetry, studies his braking points, his micro-adjustments, his tire management, and uses those insights to rebuild. That would mean engineering teams adapting their philosophy, creating a car that tolerates different driving styles, and building a development program centered on flexibility. If Ferrari chooses this route, Hamilton's performance becomes a blueprint, the moment that finally forced the team to evolve. It could, in theory, turn chaos into the seed of a championship machine, and suddenly, the headlines about zero performance would read like a turning point rather than an obituary. The second path is far darker: panic. If Ferrari doubles down on old assumptions, defends a single interpretation of the car, or, worse, allows politics to determine engineering direction, Hamilton's run will be treated as an outlier or even a threat. That leads to internal division, a fractured driver hierarchy, and the risk of losing the very person who just exposed a solution. Imagine a scenario where Leclerc's confidence erodes further because the team's messaging changes, or where Hamilton becomes disillusioned and walks away mid-season. The cost wouldn't just be talent. It would be the tacit knowledge and development pathways Hamilton unlocked during that race. For the rest of the paddock, Qatar was a wake-up call. Even a dead car can be a weapon in the right hands, and Hamilton remains the driver to watch. Rival teams now know Ferrari's problems might be fixable, and that raises the stakes for 2026. If Ferrari does the hard work and reinvents the car around adaptable inputs, they could be unstoppable. If they allow ego and politics to dictate the response, the team could fragment at the worst possible time. So what do you want to see happen? Type either "listen and rebuild" or "tensions and teardown" in the comments. And tell me briefly why. Also, quick one. Would you keep Hamilton if you were running Ferrari? Yes or no? Defend your pick below. If you found this breakdown useful, do me a favor. Like the video and subscribe. We're pushing toward 2,000 subscribers, and every new sub helps us make more deep dives like this.